Have you ever wondered why some engines become legends while others fade into history? You probably think the Ram Air 4 was just another muscle car engine from the golden age of American performance. But if you thought Pontiac's Ram Air 4 was simply a hopped-up 400 with a fancy air cleaner, you're wrong. What you didn't know is that this engine broke so many rules and hid so many secrets that even Pontiac engineers were surprised by what they created. In the next few minutes, you'll discover 20 weird facts about the 1970 Pontiac 400 Ram Air that will completely change how you see this legendary power plant, including one fact that explains why racers literally threw away a crucial engine part the moment they got their cars home. The name Ram Air 4 never meant what you think. Everyone assumes the Ram Air 4 got its name from having 4 ram air intakes feeding cold air to the engine. Makes sense, right? 4 intakes, Roman numeral 4, case closed. Except that's completely wrong. The real story is far stranger. Pontiac originally planned a revolutionary 4-inlet cold air induction system for this engine. Engineers spent months designing an elaborate setup with 4 separate air intakes that would channel cold air from multiple sources. The marketing department loved it so much they went ahead and named the engine Ram Air 4 before the system was finalized. Then reality hit. The 4-inlet design proved too complex and expensive for production. Wind tunnel testing showed minimal gains over a simpler dual-inlet setup. But here's the kicker. They'd already printed the brochures, made the badges, and announced the Ram Air 4 name to dealers. Rather than admit the mistake, Pontiac quietly scrapped the 4-inlet system but kept the name. So every Ram Air 4 engine ever made carries a name based on a feature that never existed. The IV simply designated it as the 4th iteration of Pontiac's Ram Air development program, but customers never knew they were buying an engine named after phantom intakes. Only 1970, Trans Ams got this engine. When Pontiac unveiled the 2nd-generation Firebird Trans Am on February 26, 1970, they faced a problem. The model year was already half over. Production delays meant they had less than 6 months to build 1970 Trans Ams before switching to 1971 models. This compressed timeline created one of the rarest muscle cars ever made. Out of 3,596 Trans Ams built for 1970, only 88 received the Ram Air 4 engine. Think about that for a moment. 88 cars. That's fewer than 2 per state if you distributed them evenly across America. But it gets even more exclusive. Of those 88 Ram Air 4 Trans Ams, only 29 came with automatic transmissions. The other 59 had 4-speed manuals. Finding one of these cars today is like finding a needle in a haystack, except the haystack is the size of Texas and the needle is made of gold. Many were raced hard and blown up. Others rusted away in backyards. Experts estimate maybe half survive today in any condition. The rarity has created a fascinating phenomenon. More people claim to own a 1970 Ram Air 4 Trans Am than actually exist. At car shows, you'll meet guys who swear their cousin's neighbor had one, but documentation proves otherwise. These 88 cars have become the unicorns of the Pontiac world. You couldn't order Ram Air 4 on a regular Firebird. Here's something that made no sense to buyers in 1970. Want a Ram Air 4 in your new GTO? No problem. Want one in your Judge? Absolutely. Want one in your regular Firebird or Formula? Sorry, not happening. For 1970 only, Pontiac made the bizarre decision to limit Ram Air 4 availability in Firebirds exclusively to the Trans Am model. This wasn't a supply issue. They had plenty of Ram Air 4 engines. It wasn't a technical problem. The engine fit perfectly in any Firebird. The restriction was pure marketing strategy, and it backfired spectacularly. Pontiac wanted to position the Trans Am as the ultimate Firebird, so they gave it exclusive access to their wildest engine. But customers who wanted Ram Air 4 power without the Trans Am's flashy spoilers and stripes were out of luck. Dealers reported frustrated buyers walking away when they learned they couldn't get the engine in a Formula 400. The policy made even less sense considering the Formula was marketed as the pure performance Firebird without the Trans Ams visual extras. Some dealers tried creative ordering tricks to get around the restriction, but Pontiac's ordering system blocked every attempt. This one-year-only policy remains one of Pontiac's most puzzling decisions. By 1971, they came to their senses and offered the 455 HO in multiple Firebird models. The same engine had two different horsepower ratings open a 1970 Pontiac brochure, and you'll notice something odd. The Ram Air 4 was rated at 370 horsepower in the GTO, but only 345 horsepower in the Trans Am. Same displacement, same heads, same cam, same compression, but 25 fewer horses in the Firebird. What gives? This wasn't a typo or marketing trick. The difference was real, and it came down to exhaust systems. GTOs used a true dual exhaust setup with minimal restriction. Trans Ams, due to their unique chassis design, required a more restrictive exhaust routing that cost genuine power. But Pontiac's engineers discovered something interesting during dyno testing. While the Trans Am lost peak horsepower, its exhaust design actually improved low-end torque. The more restrictive system created better exhaust velocity at lower RPMs, giving Trans Am stronger acceleration from traffic lights. Some racers figured this out and swapped Trans Am exhaust manifolds onto their GTOs for better street performance. The 25 horsepower difference also created insurance advantages. Trans Am owners could honestly tell their insurance companies they had the 345 horsepower version, potentially saving money on premiums. Meanwhile, both versions made far more than their advertised power. Independent dyno tests showed real output closer to 410 horsepower when tuned properly. Those legendary 6-1-4-cylinder heads. The heart of any Ram Air 4's power came from its special cylinder heads, and the 1970 version used castings that became holy grails for Pontiac enthusiasts. These weren't just any heads. They carried the casting number 614 and featured round exhaust ports instead of the D-shaped ports found on regular Pontiac heads. But what made them truly special went beyond port shape. The 614 heads used combustion chambers measuring between 71 and 72 cubic centimeters, carefully designed for optimal flame travel. The intake valves measured 2.11 inches, while exhausts were 1.77 inches. Bigger than standard 400 heads, but not cartoonishly huge. Here's where it gets interesting. Pontiac cast these heads with extra material in critical areas. Experienced porters could remove metal in specific spots to dramatically improve flow without weakening the casting. But remove too much and you'd break through into water jackets. The learning curve was expensive. The round exhaust ports created their own mysteries. Why did Pontiac switch from D ports to round? Engineers claimed better flow, but dyno tests showed mixed results. The real advantage came at high RPM, where round ports maintained velocity better. Some racers actually welded up the round ports and remachined them into D shapes, claiming better results. Every approach worked for somebody, adding to the mystique of these legendary castings. Intake ports were taller than earlier. Ram Air designs, Pontiac engineers made a subtle but crucial change to the 1970 Ram Air 4 heads that many people miss. The intake port entries stood approximately 1/8 inch taller than previous Ram Air versions. Doesn't sound like much, but in the world of airflow, that extra 1/8 inch was huge. The taller ports allowed better alignment with the intake manifold runners. Earlier Ram Air heads suffered from slight misalignment that created turbulence right where air entered the head. The taller design smoothed this transition, allowing air to flow more efficiently at high RPM. But here's what's weird. Pontiac never advertised this change. No marketing materials mentioned it. No magazine articles highlighted it. The only way racers discovered the difference was by carefully measuring and comparing heads. Word spread through the racing community like wildfire once the secret got out. The modification required new intake manifolds too. That's why 1970 Ram Air 4 intakes won't properly fit earlier engines without modification. Some enterprising racers tried filing the ports even taller, but this usually resulted in vacuum leaks. Pontiac had found the sweet spot. This seemingly minor change contributed an estimated 15 to 20 horsepower at 6,000 RPM. In drag racing, where victories are measured in hundredths of seconds, those 20 horses made champions. Factory 1.6, 5-to-1 rocker arms. While most Pontiac V8s used conservative 1.5-to-1 ratio rocker arms, the Ram Air 4 broke tradition with aggressive 1.65-to-1 rockers. This higher ratio multiplied the cam lobe lift, effectively giving you more valve lift without changing the camshaft. Simple math shows the advantage. A cam lobe with 300 thousandths lift would open valves 450 thousandths with standard rockers, but 495 thousandths with Ram Air 4 rockers. That extra 45 thousandths meant more air and fuel entering cylinders. But Pontiac's implementation was brilliant beyond just the ratio. These weren't just standard rockers with longer arms. Engineers redesigned the entire rocker system for strength and stability at high RPM. The rocker studs were relocated slightly for better geometry. The push rods were specially selected for the correct length. Everything worked together as a system. The higher ratio came with challenges. More lift meant more stress on valve springs. Springs that worked fine with standard rockers could float with the aggressive Ram Air 4 setup. Pontiac specified super stiff valve springs that made the engine sound like a diesel at idle. Many mechanics unfamiliar with Ram Air fees incorrectly diagnosed valve train noise as a problem. The aggressive rockers also accelerated wear. While a standard Pontiac might run 100,000 miles between valve jobs, Ram Air ears needed attention every 20,000 miles when driven hard. The legendary 041 camshaft. No component defined the Ram Air RFE's personality more than its radical 9794041 camshaft. This stick became so legendary that Pontiac enthusiasts still call it simply the 041. With approximately 308 degrees of intake duration and 320 degrees exhaust duration, it was wild by street standards. At 50 thousandths lift, the cam delivered 231 degrees intake and 240 degrees exhaust duration. Those numbers meant serious overlap, the period when both valves are open simultaneously. This overlap created the signature Ram Air 4 idle that sounded like the engine was barely running. But the magic happened above 3,000 RPM, where that overlap started scavenging exhaust gases and packing cylinders with fresh mixture. The cam's personality was pure race car. Below 2,000 RPM, the engine felt soggy and unresponsive. But keep your foot in it, and the power built like a tidal wave. By 4,000 RPM, you better be holding on tight. The engine pulled hard right past 6,000 RPM, where most street engines were done. Installing an 041 cam in a milder engine became a popular modification, but results varied wildly. Without the complete Ram Air 4 package, heads, compression, exhaust, the cam often made engines run worse. The 041 needed the entire supporting cast to shine. Many original cams were reground over the years to milder specifications when owners grew tired of the radical, idle, and poor street manners. Winter's aluminum intake manifold. Every Ram Air 4 featured a special aluminum intake manifold cast by Winter's Foundry, identified by their distinctive snowflake logo with a W in the center. This wasn't just any intake. It represented advanced casting technology for 1970. The lightweight aluminum construction saved nearly 20 pounds over iron intakes while providing better heat dissipation. But the real innovation was the separate bolt-on iron crossover that handled exhaust heat for cold weather warm-up. This two-piece design let racers remove the crossover entirely for better charge cooling. The manifold's internal design followed Pontiac's proven equal-length runner philosophy. Each cylinder received exactly the same runner length and volume, ensuring equal fuel distribution. The plenum area was carefully sized to maintain velocity while providing adequate volume for high RPM breathing. Winners cast these manifolds using a special aluminum alloy that remained stable at high temperatures. Lesser intakes would warp when exposed to Ram Air 4 heat levels, causing vacuum leaks. The winner's pieces stayed true even after years of thermal cycling. Finding an original winner's intake today is like striking gold. Reproductions exist, but lack the precise casting quality of originals. Experts can spot fakes by examining the snowflake logo. Originals have sharp, well-defined edges, while copies often show fuzzy details. The manifold's design influenced Pontiac intake development for years afterward. 4-bolt main bearing caps from the factory. While Chevrolet made headlines with 4-bolt main bearing caps in select high-performance engines, Pontiac quietly included them in every Ram Air 4. This beef-up bottom-end feature provided extra crankshaft support for high RPM operation, but Pontiac's approach differed from everyone else's. Instead of using traditional 4-bolt caps, Pontiac engineers developed a unique system. The two outer bolts actually threaded into the block at an angle, creating a wedging effect that locked the caps in place better than straight bolts. This design distributed stress over a larger area of the block. The 4-bolt setup allowed Ram Air 4 engines to reliably spin past 7,000 RPM when properly built. Standard 2-bolt Pontiac blocks would flex at these speeds, leading to bearing failure. The extra bolts kept everything stable even during missed shifts that sent the tack needle toward the moon. But here's what's interesting. Pontiac never marketed this feature. While Chevy plastered 4-bolt mains across advertisements, Pontiac treated it as just another engineering detail. Many Ram Air 4 owners didn't know about their engine's bottom-end strength until rebuilding time. The 4-bolt design created challenges for machine shops. The angled outer bolts required special fixtures for proper align honing. Shops unfamiliar with Pontiac's unique approach often damage blocks trying to machine them like Chevys. This expertise shortage keeps rebuild costs high even today. Round port iron exhaust manifolds. The Ram Air FE's round port cylinder heads demanded special exhaust manifolds, and Pontiac delivered with unique castings that became nearly impossible to find today. The right-hand manifold carried casting number 9797075, while the left showed 478141. These weren't just regular manifolds with round flanges. The internal passages were completely redesigned for the round port heads. The runners featured larger volumes and smoother transitions than D-port manifolds. But the real cleverness was in the collector area, where individual runners merged. Engineers spent countless hours on flow benches optimizing these merge points. The round port design theoretically offered better flow, but real-world results varied. Some racers claimed massive improvements, while others saw minimal gains. The truth depended on the rest of your exhaust system. With proper headers and pipes, the round ports showed their advantage. With restrictive stock mufflers, the difference was negligible. These manifolds became the first items many racers removed, replacing them with headers. As a result, surviving original manifolds command astronomical prices. Reproduction manifolds exist, but often fit poorly due to casting variations. The originals were designed specifically for 1970 frame clearances. Later Firebirds required modification for proper fit. Finding a matched pair of original round port manifolds can cost more than some complete engines. Factory gear ratios. Started at 3.90, forget highway cruising. Ram Air 4 cars came from the factory with gear ratios designed for one thing: acceleration. The standard ratio was 3.90 to 1, with 4.33 to 1 available for the truly committed. These weren't optional upgrades. You literally couldn't order a Ram Air 4 with highway-friendly gears. This mandatory short gearing reflected Pontiac's racing intentions. The radical cam made so little low-end torque that tall gears would have made the cars undrivable. 3.90 gears kept the engine in its power band during normal driving, but 4.33 gears transformed Ram Air 4 cars into animals. 60-foot times dropped dramatically. The engine stayed in its sweet spot through the quarter mile. The downside? 70 miles per hour meant the engine was spinning 4,000 RPM. Road trips became endurance tests. Many owners swapped to taller gears after the racing novelty wore off. This killed performance so badly that some thought their engines were broken. The Ram Air 4 needed those short gears like fish need water. Without them, the radical cam timing made the engine feel flat and unresponsive. Some owners tried splitting the difference with 3.55 gears, but even this compromise hurt performance noticeably. The engine was designed as a complete package, and changing any component upset the balance. No factory air conditioning option. Try ordering air conditioning on a 1970 Ram Air 4 car, and dealers would laugh. Pontiac simply didn't offer it, and the reason went beyond typical performance car thinking. The wild idle created by the 041 cam made air conditioning impossible to calibrate properly. At idle, the engine produced barely enough vacuum to operate power brakes, let alone run air conditioning controls. The irregular idle would have caused the compressor to cycle erratically, probably destroying itself within weeks. The compressed engine bay added another obstacle. Ram Air 4 engines with their special intake and exhaust barely fit under the hood. Adding air conditioning components would have required major re-engineering. But the real issue was philosophical. Pontiac positioned the Ram Air 4 as their ultimate performance statement. Air conditioning represented comfort and compromise, exactly what Ram Air 4 buyers weren't seeking. The marketing department feared diluting the engine's hardcore image. Some dealers tried retrofitting aftermarket air conditioning, but results were disastrous. The systems couldn't cope with the engine's characteristics. Condensers blocked airflow to radiators, causing overheating. Compressor brackets interfered with Ram Air components. Every installation created new problems. Modern technology has solved these issues, and restorers now successfully add air conditioning to Ram Air 4 cars. But in 1970, wanting both Ram Air 4 power and cool comfort meant buying two cars. The 1970 and a half production squeeze. The 1970 Trans Ams February 26 introduction date created a perfect storm of rarity. Most people don't realize these were technically 1970 and a half models, built during the final months of the model year. This compressed production window explains why so few Ram Air feed Trans Ams exist. Assembly lines were already tooling up for 1971 models. Suppliers had limited inventory of Ram Air full components. Workers were learning new assembly procedures for the redesigned Firebird. Everything conspired to limit production. Some Ram Air 4 engines sat on shelves waiting for Trans Am bodies that never came. Others were diverted to GTO production where demand was stronger. Pontiac's Norwood assembly plant struggled to balance different model requirements while rushing to fill Trans Am orders before the model year ended. The situation created interesting anomalies. Some late production cars mixed 1970 and 71 components. Others showed build dates just days before 1971 production began. These transition cars puzzle restoration judges who debate which parts are correct. Documentation from this period is scarce. Pontiac was focused on launching 1971 models, not maintaining detailed records of limited production 1970 cars. Many Ram Air full Trans Ams left the factory with incomplete or incorrect paperwork. This chaos contributed to their mystique and makes authenticating survivors challenging today. 1 year only Rochester carburetor, the 1970 Ram Air 4 with manual transmission, received a specific Rochester Quadra J wearing part number 7040273. This carburetor appeared for 1 year only, calibrated specifically for the Ram Air IF's unique requirements. It became one of the hardest to find pieces in Pontiac restoration. What made this carb special? The calibration accounted for the wild cam's overlap and the engine's high RPM breathing needs. Primary jets were sized differently than standard quadra jets. Secondary air valves opened more aggressively. The accelerator pump delivered a longer shot of fuel to cover the cam's soggy low-end response. But the real magic was in the secondary metering rods. Rochester engineers developed a unique taper that enriched the mixture progressively as RPMs climbed. This kept the engine from going lean at high speeds, where the Ram Air 4 made its best power. Standard quadra jets would lean out dangerously above 5,000 RPM. Finding an original 7040273 carburetor today requires deep pockets and patience. Most were modified by racers who drilled out air bleeds and changed jets. Others were simply thrown away when they developed the typical quadrajet throttle shaft wear. Reproductions exist, but often use generic calibrations that don't match the original specific fuel curves. Smart restorers send original cores to specialists who can restore the exact factory calibration. Racers immediately removed the crossover. Remember that iron crossover bolted to the aluminum intake manifold? Racers couldn't remove it fast enough. This heavy chunk of iron existed solely to warm the intake manifold for cold starts and emissions compliance. For racing, it was dead weight that heated the incoming air charge, exactly what you didn't want. The removal process took 5 minutes. Unbolt the crossover, install block-off plates, and gain free horsepower from cooler intake charges. Dyno tests showed gains of 10 to 15 horsepower just from this simple modification. Track times dropped proportionally. But Pontiac engineers had the last laugh. That crossover also served as a heat shield, protecting the aluminum intake from exhaust manifold heat. Without it, intake manifolds could warp from the temperature differential. Many racers discovered this the hard way when their engines developed mysterious vacuum leaks. The crossover situation perfectly illustrated the Ram Air IF's split personality. Street drivers needed it for cold weather drivability. Racers needed it gone for performance. No single configuration worked for everyone. This led to a thriving market in used crossovers as people swapped them depending on the season. Today, original crossovers are worth their weight in gold. Restorers need them for authenticity, but most were discarded decades ago. Reproduction pieces exist, but often fit poorly due to casting variations. The simple iron crossover has become one of the most sought-after Ram Air 4 components. 10.5 compression and 445 pound-feet Pontiac conservatively rated the Ram Air 4 at 10.5 to 1 compression. But actual ratios vary depending on combustion chamber volume and deck height. Some engines measured closer to 10.75 to 1. In 1970, this was considered radical compression requiring premium fuel. The torque rating told the real story. 445 pound-feet at just 3,000 RPM meant the Ram Air 4 pulled like a freight train once it cleared its soggy low end. This torque came from the engine's large 4-inch bore and relatively long 3.75-inch stroke. It was an over-square design, but not extremely so. Peak horsepower arrived at 5,000 RPM, but the engine pulled strongly to 6,500 RPM. This broad power band made the Ram Air 4 devastatingly effective in drag racing. While competitors needed to shift perfectly to stay in narrow power bands, Ram Air 4 drivers had more margin for error. The combination of compression, cam timing, and head flow created an engine that felt more powerful than its rating suggested. Magazine tests regularly recorded quarter-mile times that calculated to well over 400 horsepower. Either Pontiac underrated the engine for insurance purposes, or the complete package simply worked better than the sum of its parts. Contemporary dynamometer tests were rare, but those that exist show outputs between 400 and 420 horsepower when properly tuned. Round port design influenced future Pontiac engines. The 1970 Ram Air Fees round exhaust ports seemed like a technological dead end when Pontiac returned to D ports for most 1971 applications. But the round port concept refused to die, resurfacing in the 1971 and 72 455 HO engines that became Pontiac's last factory performance statements. Engineers had learned valuable lessons from the Ram Air 4 program. Round ports worked best with specific cam timing and compression ratios. The 455 HO incorporated these lessons, using slightly smaller round ports that maintained velocity better at street RPMs. The heads looked similar but incorporated subtle improvements. Why did Pontiac flip-flop on port shapes? Internal politics played a role. Different engineering teams favored different approaches. The Ram Air I-4 team loved round ports while the standard engine group preferred D ports. When the Ram Air program ended, D port advocates regained control. But track results kept validating round ports for maximum performance. The 455 HO's success proved the Ram Air 4 team had been right all along. Round ports could make more power when properly implemented. This vindication came too late. Emissions regulations and insurance concerns were already killing performance cars. The round versus D port debate continues among Pontiac enthusiasts today. Both designs have advantages depending on application, but everyone agrees the Ram Air Fees round ports pushed Pontiac engineering forward, even if the journey included some detours. 12-bolt differential for 1970 Firebirds. Here's a fact that surprises even Pontiac experts. 1970 Firebirds, including Ram Air 4 Trans Ams, used Chevrolet 12-bolt rear differentials instead of Pontiac units. This one-year anomaly resulted from production logistics at the newly consolidated Norwood assembly plant where F-bodies were built. The Chevy 12-bolt was actually stronger than Pontiac's equivalent, handling the Ram Air Fees torque without complaint. But the swap created parts confusion that persists today. Restoration shops regularly encounter 1970 Firebirds with wrong Pontiac differentials installed by previous owners who didn't know about the Chevy unit. Using Chevrolet components in a Pontiac seemed like heresy to brand loyalists. Some dealers actually apologized to customers, explaining it was temporary. But racers quickly realized the 12-bolt's advantages. Stronger gears, better aftermarket support, and proven durability made it superior for performance use. The differential swap required unique drive shafts, suspension mounting points, and brake components. Nothing interchanged with other Pontiac models. This one-year-only configuration makes finding correct replacement parts challenging. Many 1970 Firebirds now run later Pontiac differentials simply because parts are unavailable. Pontiac returned to their own differentials for 1971, ending the Chevrolet experiment. But Ram Air 4 Trans Am owners had already discovered their cars came with one of the strongest rear ends available, even if it wore a bow tie. Firebird Ram Air Fees had unique throttle linkage. The final weird fact about 1970 Ram Air Fees involves something so obscure that most owners never knew it existed. Firebird applications, including the Trans Am, used a special secondary throttle restrictor in the carburetor linkage that limited how far the secondaries could open. This wasn't a defect. It was intentional. Pontiac engineers discovered that Firebird engine bays created different airflow patterns than GTOs. Full secondary opening in a Firebird could cause fuel distribution problems at certain speeds. The restrictor prevented this by limiting secondary throttle plates to about 90% of full travel. Most drivers never noticed because the restriction only affected absolute full throttle operation above 5,000 RPM. But drag racers immediately spotted the performance limitation. Quarter-mile times were consistently a tenth or two slower than identical GTO setups. The fix was simple: remove one small tang on the linkage and gain full secondary operation. The modification took 60 seconds with basic tools. But here's the catch: removing the restrictor sometimes made the engine run worse. The engineers had been right about those airflow patterns. Some Firebirds ran better with the restriction in place. This led to endless debate among racers about the correct setup. Today, judges debate whether the restrictor should be present on restored cars. Documentation is scarce because it was such a minor component. Many restrictors were removed and discarded decades ago. The tiny piece of metal has become another holy grail for correct restorations. That's all for today, folks. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button so you don't miss the next one. See you there.